I've ridden all over the world,
Yeah.
but I've never ridden around the world.
Yeah.
Fellows Ride, der Podcast. Mit offenem Visier sprechen wir mit interessanten Gästen über Motorradfahren und mentale Gesundheit.
So, hi, fellows. Welcome to another episode, Fellows Ride podcast. It's the 26th of episode, and it's one of a very special one, I can tell you and promise you. So, we talk about motorcycling and mental health in Germany, in Europe, around the world. And today, there are continents and many of thousands kilometers between our guests and me. It's a great honor for me to welcome to the show Paul de Oleon, and Jürgen Ulrich. So great to have two legends of motorbike culture here with us, and I'm super excited for the talk. Let's start with a standard question at the beginning, which this time is intercontinental. Paul, where are you right now?
Right now, I'm in my sunroom in San Francisco. So this is my primary residence, but I live half the year in Mexico, in the very southern tip of Baja,
Oh, wow.
California. So I live in two places in California, one in the cold San Francisco Bay and one in the warm and sunny Sea of Cortez.
Wow. That's great. Then you have the warmest temperature on your doorstep, I think, from three of us.
In the Sea of Cortez, it's not crazy hot. It's not like Palm Springs in the summer or something, but it's warm all year. It's lovely.
Oh, wow. Thank you. And Jürgen, where, and this is a very relevant question, because I know where he's sitting. Jürgen, where are you sitting in front of your computer now?
Okay, I'm sitting in the cold summer, so now you can see. Okay, where could be a cold summer at this time? So I'm nearly on the same, let's say, time zone as Paul, a little off, but I'm sitting right now in Ushuaia, Argentina, wow. On the most southern part of Argentina. I'm just looking out there the window on the bay, and if I look further, there's the Antarctica, and wow. So. I'm probably the most southern guy in this talk today.
Yeah, unless
and I live in Germany, and I say, okay, my heart lives in America, and I travel all over the world. So it's it's a good thing to be here, and it's as good to talk to you.
Is it? Can you see the ice from the Antarctica from Ushuaia? No, at the horizon. No, it's too far. It's too far.
No, only if I open the fridge, I can see the ice.
Yeah, but to make the comment, it's the most southern, or they say the most southern city in the world, around the world. So it's super south.
It's this is what it said, that Ushuaia is the most southern city in the world, but actually it's not true. It's Port Williams, what's right on the other side of the bay. So what's Chile. It's the most southern Argentinian city, and it's a bigger city. And talking about the ice, I'm at the moment on a motorcycle ride all across the American continent, so South America, North America, as I did last year, Africa and Europe. And my target was, after I started 4 weeks ago in Valparaiso, to ride down to Ushuaia, then turn back and ride back north to Alaska. But as I got here, and I said, okay, you're pretty south here, but maybe there's a way to go even further south. And then I looked at the map and looked at Antarctica and say, wow, that's the seventh continent. How cool would it be to be there? Even if it's not just cool, it's also cold. But so I decided really shortly last week to get on a boat on Monday and have 2 weeks on Antarctica, explore Antarctica. Too bad I can't bring my motorcycle. I have to leave it here because it would be really fun to have a short ride on Antarctica. But I think it will be phenomenal anyway. So to get this close, I checked the map. At the most southern point I will be about 600 miles from the South Pole.
Yeah. Wow, fantastic,
amazing. Yeah.
So there have been motorcycles in Antarctica.
Right. Yeah.
I posted an article years ago about Yeah, so the British were the first to create a year-round base in Antarctica, and actually, a dear friend of mine was their first staff photographer. He was a big motorcycle collector. His name was Ken Bolter. Anyway, but another friend from Australia, Dennis Quinlan, sent me photographs of a Velocet in Antarctica on the British base in the late 50s, and them riding it around in some crazy ice field. And so it's been done.
It's been
It's
done,
been
eh?
done. Yeah.
Wow. Great.
It's been done. Yeah.
So to make it complete, I'm sitting in the Algarve in south of Portugal, and you see, I mean, we have to appreciate it and think about it. What we are doing now here via Zoom,
Hmm.
and when I started motorbiking, it would be a science fiction thing or something. Yeah? Nobody, it's so the
Incredible.
development is great, incredible. Yeah. So it's and now pretty much a challenge for me to introduce both of you because there's a lot to say, and but let's have a try. I start with Paul. Paul de Orléans is French, right? Or de Orléans is a French
Yes, it
name.
is French. Yeah.
It's
Somewhere back in the 1790s, yes.
oh wow, yeah,
That's
it's a
when my
nice name.
family came to the States or came to North
Okay,
America.
okay. Paul is the well-known fellow in the world of motorbike culture, but particularly known for his contributions as an author, historian, and curator. He's particularly appreciated for his ability to put the art, culture, and history of motorbikes center stage, often going beyond traditional engineering and racing. Paul is the founder and main author of the Vintagent. Vintagent, what's the pronunciation is? Vintagent.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And influential website specializing in motorbikes and their cultural significance. Since 2006, the platform has offered insights into the aesthetics, history, design of motorbikes. It's all about design. It's all about history. It's all about culture, right? And
Yeah.
but what did I forget in my introduction? What is worth it to know about you?
Well, I'm a lifelong motorcyclist. I started intensively collecting and researching vintage motorcycles in the 80s after I graduated from university and with a degree in art and design and politics. And so those remained like my primary focus even as I approached motorcycles. My father was a professor of history, so it was natural that I took up his profession in a way, in a different way. I don't work for a university. I've always been independent and followed my nose for really good stories. So, yeah, it's led to books about choppers and cafe racers and exhibitions about overlanding and Italian design and also electric motorcycles, custom motorcycles. So, yeah, anything that suits my fancy, where there's some integration of, human passion in a real expression. I've never been one of those people who wants to talk about techniques. I mean, I get techniques. I deeply understand. As someone who has restored and maintained old motorcycles for 45 years, I get the techniques. But that story is told. Like 90% of the motorcycle books are technical or just recounting the history of races and things like that. And to me, there's so much more to motorcycling. So I find something like, as we were discussing before the show, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance and his sort of integration of culture and mental health and travel with a discussion of motorcycling. That's much more my jam, as we say, than something strictly technical.
Mm.
So yeah, I produce exhibitions. I've produced a lot of events as well for kind of in the same vein with film premieres and music and art exhibitions. I founded the Motorcycle Film Festival in New York with Corinna Mantlo back in 2013, which other people have taken up now, including in Portugal. There's a fabulous
Yeah.
motorcycle film festival in Portugal and Lisbon. Yeah. So I keep busy. All kinds of things.
That's super interesting. And maybe Jürgen will tell his point of view for the German guys, because you are not that well known in Germany than in US, I think, before this podcast. After it will be different for sure. So, uh, second guy, Jürgen, is so hard to introduce. I know him very well. We are friends, we're really good friends with you and Ursula for decades because we are both mainly living in Würzburg in northern Bavaria in Germany. And but he's a super well-known fellow in Germany for in the Harley Davidson scene, and he has made a name for himself as an enthusiast, collector, and expert in Harley Davidson motorbikes. Uh, I can recommend your exhibition, your museum of Harley Davidson motorbikes in close to Würzburg. It's really worth it to visit. I'm sure you will tell us more about this. And you are participant in numerous events relating to iconic bikes. So Jürgen Ulrich is Harley Davidson, yes, but right now in Ushuaia, you are not with a Harley Davidson, I know. You will tell us later with which bike you are in the most southern city in the world. But I know once there was an episode that somebody from Harley Davidson headquarters in US asked you for a type of color of a special motorbike, because the knowledge you have about Harley Davidson is really outstanding. And here, what we are doing together is Fellows Ride, our Fellows Ride for mental health and motorcycling. He's a team member, very important team member, because he is helping us with expanding in the US. So we gave him a title, of course. He's the official ambassador of Fellows Ride and head of global expansion. So, and he did a really good job. Last year, we had the first Fellows Ride in Wisconsin. And
Huh?
he asked me, no, this year, this season, the last season.
Yeah,
and after that, because it was super successful, we had an audience, we had the medias, and we had 10,000 bucks for donations, and it's really a great deal, big deal. And after that, he asked me how many Fellows Rides do I want next season in the US. So it's yeah, Jürgen, you are really not only a good friend and you are a super expert was what motorbikes is. But if I have any questions, I know you have the answer. And no, it's you. What did I forget in my introduction?
I think you only forgot what you don't know. So and I don't know if I want to say all of that, but but to make the world around, it's yes, okay. I'm into motorbikes for a long time. Like this is something that I definitely are kind of brother of Paul, because for me, life without motorcycles is no life. And if it's riding, if it's collecting, if it's just experience, if it's just looking at them, everything that has to do with motorcycles now is something that's fascinating for me. And if I go back into my history, like when I was a kid, I was trying to do anything with bicycles. At age of 13, I restored my first moped. This was a
Wow.
1955 Rixe that my dad bought when he was 16 years old, and I still have it. It's still in my collection. I will never sell it.
No.
And so this was the first motorbike I sat on when I was 2 years old, when my mom was riding it. And then that was really let's say the point or the time when everything changed for me. This was in 1979 when I opened up the Easy Riders magazine, and there was the introduction of the new 1980 Harley Davidson White Glide. I was 14 years old. I looked at this picture and I was blown away, like, wow, what kind of motorcycle. And for me, it was like having heard about Easy Rider and the Chopper and Freedom and everything. I got completely hooked. From this point on, I cut everything out of magazines, put it in my school books. And then when I turned 17, I wanted to have a Harley Davidson. I couldn't afford it. So I bought an NSU Max from 1953 and made a really bad thing with it that Paul would hate. I built a chopper out of it.
Okay, I wrote the book on choppers, so you know.
I know your book, and I love it. I love it. I have to say, really, just read the first 3-4 pages. You gotta read it all. No, I built a chopper out of it because I was completely into choppers, and then 2 years later, I bought my first Harley, and then the whole thing did go on. I always thought about, because I studied engineering, and after having my engineering degree, maybe to do something with motorcycles, but then, because of something that happened in my life, this was that a company next to where I live had to weld my oil tank of my Harley, and they were in the bakery industry. I ended up in the bakery industry, so I spent all my life working in the bakery industry, and had the motorcycles always aside. But I never got off it. So first starting riding bikes, then I got more into, let's say, the older bikes from the 40s, 50s, 60s, and then I got really into the old vintage bikes, and then really the going to the really bikes from the 1910s and 20s was when I met in 1914 a good friend of mine in America, and he told me about the motorcycle Cannonball. And then I was looking for an older bike in 1914, 15, and then I rode my first Cannonball in 1916, where I met Paul first time.
Right.
And so motorcycle was always something that was very, very important. And if you ask me, okay, what's your passion? My passion is really motorcycles, riding around the world, and meeting friends. Because if somebody asks me, okay, you've been all around the world, which place do you like the most? What is the most beautiful place? I always, my answer is, okay, where my friends live.
Yeah.
My home is where my bike is. Yeah.
Hmm.
Uh, funny stories, and that's what the podcast is for as well, to listen to the stories like this. And in the preparation of the podcast, Paul, I read in a magazine, I think it was a German magazine, Classic Driver, and you mentioned that you had a Thruxton race motorbike, and from 1989. So you bought it 1989, obviously. And the question is, from whom did you buy this? Because you mentioned that it's a funny story and there's to tell.
Oh, it's a hell of a story. Well, long story. There was a shop called Good Old Days across the bay from me in Oakland. And I had several friends that actually worked there. And it was one of these mysterious shops that didn't really sell anything and didn't really do any work for other people. But there was a very large collection of incredible motorcycles. Like this 1965 Velocette Thruxton was the lowest motorcycle in the collection. Everything else was, Bruff Superior SS100 or Vincent Black Lightning or pre-war Vincent V Twins, or crazy, crazy collection. And one day I got a phone call. Oh, I expressed to my friends who worked there and to the owner, I say, hey, if you ever want to sell that Velocette, I would be very interested. And so I did get a phone call one day very early saying, hey, Paul, if you want that Velocette, we need a check for $7,600, a bank check for $7,600 tomorrow because the owner has been arrested. Like, what? So it turned out he was the largest privateer manufacturer of amphetamines in the United States at the time. He had made 6 tons of amphetamine. This is 30 years before Breaking Bad, and the feds had been chasing him for decades, and he was finally caught. And I mean, it's a hell of a story. I was able to come up with the money. To me, this was like 3 times more than I'd ever paid for a motorcycle, but a friend helped me out and I made it happen. So yeah, that was 1989, and I've kept the bike ever since. So yeah, it's a Velocette Thruxton, which was their production racer, but it's really a wonderful street bike. And for a time, even, it was my only transportation for a couple of years, which gives lie to people saying that their British bikes are unreliable or difficult to start. It's like this was like how I got around in my late 20s. So yeah, that's kind of the backstory. I mean, it's a actually this everything. The world is a hologram, right? Every discussion you bring up, everything is in that discussion. So circling back to this amphetamines, I got intrigued when I heard that after 12 years, this man, Ben Kalka, was out of prison. I said, 12 years for 6 tons of amphetamines. This doesn't make any sense. So I reached out to him and we began a conversation and I began to do my research on amphetamine. And amphetamine is one of the most prescribed drugs in the United States, and the primary recipients are children because it's sold as Adderall and Ritalin. These are close analogs of amphetamine, and it cures nothing, but it does help with certain symptoms, and it does help children or people with ADD or ADHD. It helps them to focus. So I was like, wow, this is the most prescribed drug in history. And yet this man is a demon for manufacturing it without government sanction, which is, that's an old story in itself. I mentioned before the podcast that I studied politics as well as art and design. And so, there was a story of like illicit drug culture versus like sanctioned drug culture, something like 4 billion amphetamine pills are in circulation right now being given to children. And yet this man was a demon for making an unsanctioned version. It's was fascinating to me. And it turned out that he had purchased the components there are 2 principal components to make amphetamine, both of which are used in the food industry, like in industrial food industry. And they're tightly regulated, of course. So he got 3 tons of component A from a admiral in the local Navy base and 3 tons of component B from a general. It was a government sting, but doing a little research on who these people were, they were both deeply involved in the Iran-Contra affair in the 80s at the same time, which was these guys sold weapons to the Nicaraguans and other right-wing juntas and got in exchange cocaine and imported it to the United States and created the crack epidemic. So it's like, just from me buying this Thruxton, we're talking about a very big story with lots of cultural, political, economic, social threads there. And that's just kind of how my brain works. It's like,
yeah, but that's why we are doing motorbiking, right? It's about motorbiking, telling stories, exchange stories, and it's true. But when I have 2 legends like you do, Jürgen and Paul, and I know that you have or have had a lot of motorbikes, old motorbikes. The question is, who of you has had the oldest motorbike?
I'm sure Paul.
I have a 1902 Clément. It's a little French autocyclette. It's a moped basically, but in 1902 that was a motorcycle. Like there were not many. Indian was just getting started with something more like a motor, and there were a few other manufacturers producing proper motorcycles, but most of the motorcycles at the turn of the century were bicycles with an engine attached. So that's what this is.
But you have it in your garage still, right?
It's in my warehouse. Yeah. I keep a warehouse for my motorcycles.
Rideable?
Right now, I'm doing some work on it, but yes, it is a functioning machine. It's original paint, even amazing. I bought it in France, and I took the engine off and put it in a hard suitcase, and I put the chassis in a cardboard bicycle box from a bicycle shop, and I got it home for $50.
Wow.
A good trick.
But Jürgen, the oldest bike you have is not that far away, right?
It's a little. It's. I would say if you talk about motorcycle technology and how motorcycles developed, it's a huge difference. Mine is a 1911 Harley Davidson. Yeah. So from 1982 to
Fabulous.
1911, that's a lot. And my 1911, this is the bike I rode on the 2021 motorcycle Cannonball. Yeah. No,
Wow. So it's a
no.
single cylinder belt drive
Right. Single cylinder belt drive. Yeah. True. Yeah. Yeah.
with
Yeah.
a
With
belt
with
tensioner clutch
right with the belt
idler.
tensioner clutch. Yeah. With the atmospheric valve, and
Amazing.
yeah, and the really nice carburetor with a
Yeah.
leather valve in there. Yeah, no, I it did pretty well, and this is something that's fascinating. So, and I'm sure Paul would say the same. If for me, the reason when people ask me, so why do we have all these motorcycles and what are you doing with it? I said, it's really cool to look at them at the museum, and it's really cool to read about them and see them. But you only know what's real if you ride them.
Yeah.
So and
Yeah.
to get on these bikes and to ride them, and then to get the feeling, okay, how was life and how was riding motorcycles in the 1910s, in the 20s, in the 30s? Now, this is something you can only experience if you get on the bike and ride it. No.
And it's
What is
amazing
the
how good
kind of
it's
feeling?
amazing. Go ahead. I mean, well, I was just going to say it's amazing how good they are too. Even
Yes,
1911, it's like
yes.
they work.
Yes, they work, and what I say is great. These bikes were working 100 years and 200 years still. I don't know
Yeah.
about the bikes we build today. I'm
Yeah,
pretty
yeah,
sure
it's
not.
true.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
pretty sure not.
electronics.
Right.
But
So
the
can
feeling
you
is
the feeling?
go.
That's what
Yeah, the
the
feeling.
keyword. What
It's
is the feeling to ride a motorbike like this? I mean, it's super
yeah,
special, eh?
yeah. For
More than
the
100 years old. More than
yeah, well,
100 years old.
you can go ahead and talk about your feeling about your Harley, and I'll talk about other bikes.
Yeah. So the feel about riding a bike like this. Okay, if you're used to ride, let's say, modern motorcycles, it feels like a bicycle that's I would say on drugs because I was just thinking about your amphetamine that you said. I said, okay, right. So just get on the bike, then you don't need that. No, it's if you ride a bike like this, it's if it's the suspension, if it's the frame, if it's the brakes, nothing works like you would think it should work now. And still, the engine at this time is pretty powerful, even if we just talk about maybe 2, 3, or 4 horsepowers. But you still can go close to 50 miles an hour or 40 miles an hour. And
Yeah.
riding on a bike like this with 40 miles an hour is kind of speed. But on the other hand, if you have a long straight, like I remember some really nice sections on the 2021 Cannonball, and you have your bike running at a nice speed, it's so smooth, it's so cool, it's so nice. You're one with the machine, with the mechanic, with the landscape, with everything. It's a feeling that you
Mm.
can't have if you are on a modern motorcycle and you speed somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I find that all motorcycling is wonderful. It's kind of a miracle of physics. I say it's like, okay, so how two wheels balance when they're in gyroscopic rotation. It's an experience similar to bicycling, but also to like skiing and playing with gravity, because when you go around corners, like skiing, you are playing with gravity and resistance. But it's like it's infinite. It's you're not relying on a slope or a ski lift. You can do it all day. You can ride to South America and enjoy this feeling. But there's so many components to me. Like a Cannonball is a beautiful example, riding across the United States on back roads, and I find that the moving through a landscape, this is something that really isn't discussed a lot, but there is something about I don't know the neuromechanics of it, but as a landscape passes your vision, your peripheral vision, you're exposed 360. You're smelling, you're breathing the air, you're feeling the temperature and the humidity and the sun or the rain. Uh, it's a transformative experience. It's I think psychically I liken it to like taking a scouring pad to my psyche. Like this landscape is just clearing it out. It doesn't mean you're not without troubles or concerns, especially on a really old bike. You're maybe thinking a little bit about that little noise you hear, which is another part of riding a vintage. But I think with all motorcycles, the reason people love travel on motorcycles is because there's something about that mix of the vulnerability, the fact that you're taking in all this environmental stimulus, and yet you have the thrill of power at your command. It's a super intoxicating mix, and not everybody gets it, but the people who get it, they're hooked for life.
Mhm. It's interesting because I think a racer has another feeling when he go through the bend with 300 or 400 Ks, and it's so different. The whole motorbike scene is so different and versatile. It's yeah, it's a superior description. And Cannonball, you both met on a Cannonball. You did one together or something.
Yeah, 2016, I did my first in 2012, and then 2014, 2016, and 2018 was my last. But in 2016, I didn't ride. I was just with my partner, Susan McLaughlin. We shoot tintype photographs, which are wet plate medium 1850s style technology. So all homemade photography. We mix our own chemicals. We have a dark room in our van. So we were taking portraits of the cannonball riders and the landscape as we crossed the country. So that year, we had done it while I rode the cannonball in 2012 and 2014, which was wonderful, but difficult because it's a difficult process. So riding and photographing with Susan driving the van behind was challenging. So one year we just decided, okay, we're just going to focus on the photography. So that's when I met Jürgen. And yeah, so fun. What an amazing excuse to travel across the United States with really interesting people and really cool motorcycles, and I've seen my own country, in ways I never would have. And I say this about long distance motorcycle rallies. It's like, if you want to get to know your world, go riding for a week somewhere else,
Mm.
and you'll get it. It's really
Jürgen,
good.
would you be so kind and tell our audience what is about this Cannonball? Because it's for Germans, it's a special event.
That's
What is it
true. Yeah,
about?
yeah, okay. The motorcycle cannonball is something that really goes back to in history. And this is something where I'm sure Paul knows also a lot about it. This is when Eric Baker, Cannonball Baker, rode cross country the United States and kind of set some speed records. No? How fast can you ride from coast to coast? To show how reliable motorcycles are, and for sure, okay, how fast he can ride. And this idea is something that was picked up by Lonnie Isam Jr. in 29 or 28, I don't know which year it was. And then in 2010, he said, okay, why not do something like he did in the 1920s? Today with the old motorcycles. And so he created the idea of the motorcycle cannonball to ride with vintage bikes from coast to coast. And as Paul said, first time was 2010, then 2012 and 2014. And I didn't know about that until in 2014. Yeah, it was 2014, yeah. I was looking for a really nice Serbic car. And I found a really nice Serbic car in the United States, in Vermont. And at this time, I reached out for the owner, and I flew there. I talked to him, and then I asked him. It was a really, really nice 1939, well-restored bike. And I asked him, so what's the reason you're selling this nice Serbian car? You should keep it. And he said, no, I need the money for the motorcycle cannonball. And I said, motorcycle cannonball, what's that? And then he told me about the story. And I said, okay, all right, let's do it this way. I found another really nice one from a collection in New York that I'm going to buy, but I'm going to help to sell your Serbian car in Germany because there is worth more money than the United States. And then you can take the money, ride the cannonball, and I will come and visit you at the cannonball. So I sold his Serbian car. Now I lived up to my promise now, and saw Richard Duda, what's his name, at the motorcycle cannonball. I talked to Lonnie Isam, and I got completely hooked. Like, oh, I got to do this. I got to do this. No way, I'm not going to do this. So, but at this time it was really hard also to get a spot at the motorcycle cannonball. So I talked to Lonnie Sam and said, so what can I do to get a spot or two, maybe for me or for my dad? So to make the long story short, Lonnie Sam came to Germany. He visited me. He saw my collection. We talked about motorcycles, and we stood on the balcony and said, "Okay, Jürgen, you got a spot." So this is how I got into the motorcycle cannonball. And then the whole thing starts like, okay, which bike do you take? Where do you get the bike from? How to prepare it? And then 2016 was the first time I rode a motorcycle cannonball. This was from coast to coast. And I really loved it. And I said, I got to do this again. And then I was signed up for the 2018 Cannonball, but couldn't do it because I had my company still up and running and I didn't have time. But then the next time was then 2020. But 2020 didn't happen because of the crazy world that time. And so it was 2021. And 2021, it was also hard to get there because there were still the travel restrictions. So what I did, I flew my bike to the United States. I flew myself to Mexico, stayed there 2 weeks, then entered the US from Mexico to get to the Cannonball and ended up being the only not American rider on the 2021 Cannonball.
Wow.
And as Paul already said, you meet really the nicest people and the nicest bikes there. It's and even if you just go there and see the bikes and watch the people, you should really look out. And if you have the chance to go there and meet, yeah, it's an amazing experience.
Oh yeah. So a lot of stories, a lot of history, culture, and we heard many stories around about motorcycling and super interesting. Let's come to the second part of the podcast. It's about mental health. So when I got the latest newsletter from you, Paul, it was forwarded to me from Peter Müller, another fellow from Frankfurt. He's organizing the Fellows Ride in Frankfurt. And he is obviously a fan of you and your newsletter, so he forwarded me. And after I reading this newsletter, I asked Jürgen immediately, "Do you know this guy from the US?" And he said, "Of course I do." And so now we have you here in the podcast, and let's talk about what you have written in the newsletter. So there was one chapter about mental health. So it was about an app.
Yeah,
an app
yeah. I was fascinated that there was a notice that an app, a phone app, was approved by our FDA as a treatment for depression. And I thought, wow, what a trip, you know. So I looked into it, and I looked into kind of the biomechanics of it, and it's about kind of neurotraining, kind of an experimental technique. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. And you know, there's this cliche, at least in English, I don't know if it's true in other countries, you know, that you never see a motorcycle parked outside a therapist's office, you know, which speaks to how wonderful motorcycling is and how it can be actually really beneficial for your mental health to go out and ride. Like I was talking, it kind of cleans out your psyche. But I've also known a lot of motorcyclists who've committed suicide, so from depression. And so it's like, well, there is a little bit of a contrast here. Maybe they should have been going to the therapist on their motorcycle, but I think their cases were a little more serious than that. But I happen to know that none of those people who committed suicide, and one was actually on a motorcycle, made a very dramatic exit over a cliff up in Northern California. And, you know, happen to know that none of those people were seeing a therapist at the time. So this idea that, you know, whatever your barrier might be to seeking help, you know, perhaps the easiest thing in the world, the thing which is freaking everywhere with us all the time, if that could help with depression, amazing, you know. Mm-hmm. So this was the start of the conversation, and you know, I'm always our mutual friend sent some links to I think it was a doctoral thesis that someone had done about motorcycling and mental health, and I said, well, this is worth exploring, you know, if you could help curate this to put it on my website or something like that, you know. It's a discussion worth having because it's doesn't happen often enough. I've known
Yeah.
far too many people struggle with serious depression, and in this community of motorcyclists without a lot of discussion around it, simple discussion. I'm struggling, so
Mhm.
uh, and social media actually has, I mean, it's horrible, but it's also, as a connector, it's okay. I have friends who say, the check in on your friends who seem to be doing the best and never complain about their emotional or mental health, because those are the ones that aren't discussing it and maybe actually do need help. So, yeah, I think it's a really important subject. And I have
Yeah.
struggled myself with depression. I had a difficult upbringing, and it had a lot of ramifications for me when I was very young. And, I didn't realize till much later in my life that I was very depressed as a child. And, and my process for healing that and overcoming that, was my own, but I recognized that what was required in my history to sort of to come to a place of positive mental health. It's been my own journey, so I recognize everybody else's journey and their struggles, and I'm sympathetic, and I think it's worth discussing for sure.
That's the meaning, or that's our mission of Fellows Ride.
Yeah,
Just raise awareness for this. And by the way, the name of the app is Rejoin, I think, Rejoin. But I will Google it and put it on the show notes.
yeah,
And yeah, but this is the reason for Fellows Ride. And we are successful with it because more and more people just talk about their sicknesses and even to accept that it is a sickness and it's not a bad mood or it's nothing easy to handle. And yeah, we can do that. And I'm super happy to expand to the US as we want to do it international, right? I mean, it's a global issue everywhere in the world is uh, psychology, depression, suicide prevention, very relevant. Yeah. So
for
at
sure.
the end of the newsletter, you wrote, "Do motorcycles help you with the blues? Tell me about." Did anybody told about it?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I had quite a
Yeah.
few people reach out to me and talk about various situations where they motorcycling helped a lot. Everyone has their own process, and I mentioned that when I was really struggling, I stopped riding a motorcycle because I thought it was dangerous, for short periods, maybe 6 months at a time. After a divorce that was traumatic, I was deeply impacted, and just stopped riding for a while. But other people talked about how, motorcycling really helped them. It's like getting on a motorcycle was the best thing they could do. It got them out of their house and into nature, and over time really was great. So everyone finds what hopefully what works for them. So
Mm.
yeah, several people reached out to me about just sharing their own stories, which I thought was really hopeful. People actually, yeah, it made me it surprised me how positively people responded to that simple note. It was just a paragraph in my newsletter.
Yeah, and it comes to this podcast.
Yeah,
And you
yeah,
now we're inspiring more and more people. That's good. That's a good thing. Yeah.
yeah.
So, what is about in the US about how they are dealing with this, or are there offers for uh, people with depression, or what is the government doing? And
Well, well, my comment on our healthcare system is delay and deny, which happened, just last week. This feedback for a CEO of a very evil healthcare company. It was dramatic, and anyway. There's violence done in the world in many ways, and corporations do violence on individuals by denying them care that they need. So in the United States, it's really difficult. Mental health care is very expensive, at least privately, and with healthcare management corporations, they may or may not pay for it. So something like an app or something that's outside of this for-profit system is hope, that isn't just a pill that is alternative. I call it an alternative process. The app is not cheap, by the way. It does cost something, but maybe the equivalent of one session of therapy, $130 or something like that. Anyway, don't get me started on the American healthcare system.
Okay.
It's truly horrific.
Yeah. But thank you very much that you are so open and you talked about yourself and your depression, and so that makes I think sense, and the people are inspired. But that's what we are doing. Take it as a sickness, as a real sickness. Try to get help as early as possible, as it's the thing. And thank you very much for this. So I have the chance to talk to two guys who knows everything about old motorcycles to give you the question, what's about the future of motorcycling?
You can start, Jürgen.
I can start. Oh, it gives you time to think about it. Okay.
Well, I'm just talking too much.
Okay.
So
No. Future of motorcycling. Okay. There's a question. Okay, technology of motorcycles, or okay, the rule of motorcycling, or the connection people to motorcycling. Okay, for me, it is that the connection between motorcycles and people is something that would be also in the future, because it's a feeling that's really special. And for me, there is really just, let's say, something that changed over the last, let's say, 30 or 40 years. This is when I was young, when I got my driver's license, all I was looking for, get a driver's license, get a motorcycle, because this was my ticket to freedom. And today, people don't see the ticket to freedom in a way that they have a vehicle they can sit on, ride out, explore the world, explore the nature. That ticket to freedom is Wi-Fi, and this is something I look at it kind of very skeptical. No? Yeah. How this would impact the whole world and the relationship of people to people, people to freedom, to motorcycling, everything in the future. And to be honest, I don't have an answer on this. Okay, but what I know is that as long as there are motorcycles in this world, and somebody owns a motorcycle and he can ride it, and somebody else sees it and wants to try it, there will be a future for motorcycle riding. Number one. Number two, okay, there are guys like me or you, Dieter, that sit on their bike, go out there and ride the world. And the last weeks when I was riding through South America, I met people from all over the world. And for them, there is no other way than going on a motorcycle and ride the world. Or on a bicycle. You see also a lot of bicycle riders. That means the two wheels, sitting on them, having the feeling of motion in an easy way, even if uphill is hard on a bicycle, is something that people get kind of addicted to. They will do it also. Technology for the future. Okay, technology changes. It changed from the 1900s when the first motorcycle was built to today, and they will change in the future. Okay, if we look into the future, we're mostly skeptical, like, oh, if this will be good, if electric motorcycles will be good, if kind of maybe self-ride driving motorcycles will be good in the future. Okay, if you would ask me, for sure, I'm more into the past. I would say, no, I don't like this. But, there are people out there that probably would love it, and that means also for new technologies there is a future. The only thing that we really should do, looking into the future, is we should be more skeptical on the technology that is offered to us, what kind of impact it has to us on one thing, how good is life, and this is really the I would say negative part I see. The positive part I see is, okay, there will be always motorcycles, there will be always two wheels, and there will be always people riding with them.
Absolutely, yeah.
I would agree with that. I mean, there will always be, people will always figure out a way to have fun on two wheels. It's funny, I was just at the giant EICMA show in Milano a month ago, and with my friend David Boras, who has El Solitario motorcycles in Spain. And he had been commissioned by Royal Enfield to customize one of their new models. And he crushed it. Artfully put it in a crusher and then mounted it on a beautiful rotating stainless steel plinth. And it said, motorcycles 1885 to 2035, and because he sees it was a protest against increasing government regulations and the move towards autonomous driving. So, and all of those questions about, we haven't talked about like facility, human abilities, like the skills that you develop to ride a motorcycle or maintain a motorcycle. This is all part of like human actualization, is like becoming a more skilled person who can do things and go out in the world. And this is a great feedback loop for your mental health. Anyway, so David, he's super cynical and but it did make me think a lot about the future of motorcycling. And, yes, I totally agree with Jürgen that the technology will change. It's constantly changing. There's always been a relationship between the industry and people have always figured out what they want, and the industry is often late to the party. But then sometimes the industry offers something that people didn't know what they wanted, and it's new and interesting. And right now we're seeing a lot of push for people to take electric motorcycles, and a lot of industries are pushing hard. And frankly, it's not going well, except for urban runabouts, lightweights, perfect application. But for the kind of riding that we like to do, long distance, it's not there. The batteries are too big and too heavy, and there's not enough infrastructure to help charging, especially in South America. My God. I don't know if you saw The Long Way Up, where Ewan McGregor, Charlie Boorman rode their Harley Davidson live wires from South America to San Francisco. It's like, yeah, was absurd. You needed an army with them to make sure they made it. So the electric thing, I'm not so certain for sports and touring motorcycles. There's been very little discussion about hydrogen, as another option, a clean option, which would not require a major technological redesign of the engines. It could work with motorcycle engines as they exist today. So that's another opportunity. So I think there's a big question mark right now about what the future will hold. And, with increasing, especially in Europe, what are we on, Euro 6 now for the regulations, design regulations, incredibly restrictive. And they're creating these freakish machines that become huge, because if you need a 7-liter airbox and a 9-liter exhaust, a muffler, it's like, how big is your motorcycle? You're carrying these two basically balloons on your bike. And so your motorcycle is 700 pounds or 900 pounds. It's like, what happened to the 300 pound or 400 pound motorcycle? So I see the designers being pushed in ways that are really challenging. And I know a lot of professional motorcycle designers, Indian and Ducati and BMW, and it's really difficult. And I think what's happening is the regulations are pushing motorcycles away from something that motorcycles always had, which was beauty. Motorcycles were beautiful until, let's say, the 1990s. The castings were beautiful. The tank shape was beautiful. It was like designers were not just creating a machine, they were creating a beautiful machine. The shape of their castings was super important, the balance and proportion. And now you look at a new motorcycle, and it's horrific. They're trying to create aesthetic shapes with a tank and a seat and fenders and things, but you look in the middle and it's like, God, it's like a dog's breakfast. It's metal mash. So
is it avant-garde? It could be avant-garde. I mean, to find a new design.
Yeah, the electric bikes are avant-garde for sure. I appreciate the aesthetics. I've done two exhibitions about electric motorcycles, and I uh, put together the first book on electric motorcycles with Gestalten back in 2016, called The Current, which was based on a thread in my website that I kept for 6 years about electric motorcycles. I've actually stopped it because when I started that thread and posted those articles and updates, there was not a lot of press in the motorcycle industry about electric bikes. But now that's changed and they get all the press they need. So they don't need me anymore. So I stopped. Plus I have concerns about mining and, things like that, that the environmental implications of electric vehicles are disturbing to me. There's a lot of greenwashing about the technology.
Sure.
So I am concerned. I worked on an organic farm when I was in university, and environmental studies was a huge part of my education. And so I love my old bikes. They're filthy. Luckily, their impact on the world is minuscule. And I would love to see, the motorcycle industry figure out how to be a little greener, for sure. But I don't think electric bikes are particularly green.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
No, I agreed 100% to Paul. And maybe Dieter, you know that when the whole electric motorcycle thing started, I got in contact with an Italian manufacturer, and then I did the first test rides for them. And then a few years ago, I bought an electric motorcycle just to see, okay, how does it ride and how can its usability compared to my other motorcycles? And I rode it for 2 years. And when people asked me, so what do you think about it? I said, okay, I think in the 20s the motorcycles were more usable than these bikes are today usable. Now,
Yeah.
if it comes to riding and everything like that, and if it comes to the technology, like okay, when they built the bikes in the 1920s, now I would say at this time they were more green to build the bikes with the materials they use and how they manufactured them, now, as they do it today with electric motorcycles. So
Yeah.
so I would say, okay, sometimes maybe it's also good to use history and look back and say, okay, wait a minute, what was done good that time, and how can we kind of transfer it into today's world? No?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
electric motorcycle, it's a fascinating technology. But if you are really objective, and if you try it and if you ride it, then you would definitely get to the point where you say, all right, I think we should focus on something else for the future.
For sure, it's an issue. It's a subject we can do minimum another podcast. A huge thing. But before I want to end and talk about the fellows' rights in the US, just a question. There's a question open, Jürgen. With which bike you are in Ushuaia? So started in Africa and went to the North Cape in Europe. Then now you are in Ushuaia, and we heard that you are a Harley expert, and so.
Yeah, okay. I don't want to answer the question just with one sentence. I want to give a little feedback. Like as you already know, I got hooked by motorcycles when I was 14. I got hooked with Harleys. I rode Harleys all my life, and for sure in the beginning I was kind of this Harley guys who was just looking one direction. There was nothing else but Harleys. Yeah, but then I realized, oh, Ducatis make nice bikes, and MV Agusta also. So, oh, maybe get on a race bike. So today I ride all kind of bikes, and then I got into the vintage bikes, and riding through the United States or in the United States, I rode in all 50 states already. And for me, the first time when I crossed the country, it had to be on a chopper. So for me, it's like riding in America. It has to be a Pan chopper riding across the country.
Fantastic.
So my first ride was on a really long fork chopper, 70s style with a Nix 1965 panhead engine, riding across the country. It was an 11-day ride from the West Coast up to Canada down to Florida, so about 6,500 miles.
Wow.
It was a cool ride. But then I rode also on vintage bikes, and I rode touring bikes, so really everything. And then when I had the idea, okay, now it's time to start riding around the world, no? And I was looking into Africa, I said, okay, riding in the jungle in the mud with a big Harley is probably not the right thing. Okay, I like the challenge of wrenching on bikes, having breakdowns, repairing them. But okay, having this challenge in America, that's fun, yeah. But having this challenge in the middle of the jungle of Africa is probably no fun.
Yeah.
So I decided, okay, all right, so maybe you should explore one more area of motorcycle riding. That's really adventure bike riding. And looking at this, I said, okay, let's take a bike where I have the least issues, where I can be pretty sure that I have a good time riding. And I did choose the Yamaha Tenere World Raid. And I rode it about 50,000 kilometers. This was Africa and Europe. And now I'm here in South America, and we'll probably add another 60 or 70,000 kilometers and having fun.
Amazing.
If I have time, if I find the break and I have time to stop, I will see you maybe on Baja or in San Francisco.
Fantastic.
Wow.
Fantastic.
And you're happy
Wonderful.
with the bike on the tour, huh? No issues, no problems.
Nothing.
Nothing.
No, I'm really happy with the bike, and it's really cool to ride, whatever circumstances. So, and I really can recommend it. But it's not the only adventure bike that you can ride. There are also other bikes that I tested and tried, but for me it was my preference, and I'm 100% satisfied. Yeah.
And that's a good,
Very cool.
good last sentence. If at least one of us is 100% satisfied, and me as well. I'm 100% satisfied as well with our chat, with this podcast. It was so interesting about two subjects. On first side, you think they don't come together, don't go together, but they are doing. That's really great. Let's talk one or two sentences about the next season, the next Fellows Ride season in the US. I know that Jürgen is very ambitious and like to organize a couple of them, and we need any support. Paul, if you want to like to join us or help us or support us, you're very welcome.
Awesome. What's the date? Or is it flexible at this point?
It's flexible. So what I do is I reach out to if it's people or dealers or some cities where I say, okay, this could be a good area to do a fellows ride. And then I get into say, okay, let's see, okay, how we can do the route, how can we advertise it, how do we get people there? It's not set to a certain state, to a certain city, or to a certain time. So it's completely open. So if you say, oh yeah, you're interested kind of to support this, I would get in contact to you and we can see what we can do in California or in Mexico.
Interesting. Okay. Very interesting.
Wow. Baja California, see?
You're living close to La Paz. The most southern city is La Paz.
Yeah, the most southern city is San Jose del Cabo, but La Paz is about an hour and a half north of me. So not far from La Paz. Wonderful area.
Cool. Yeah.
I love the desert.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, let's see. I hope we will catch up soon, personally, and wherever, whenever in the world, on a bike, on a trip.
Yeah.
With a beer and a lot of stories. So I appreciate it. And I'm really overwhelmed from the last hour. I thank you, both of you, so much for telling your stories and your expertise, of course, and your story about depression. And it was a really super great episode. I'm overwhelmed. And thank you both very much.
It was a lot of fun. Nice to see you.
Yeah, a lot of fun. Yeah, hope to see you soon, and all the best, and take care. And I hope to see you very soon. Thank you very much for this episode.
Well, thank you. It was great with you, and cheers.
Cheers.
A good Argentine red wine. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay. Bye.
No. You
So-
can continue because it's
so-
interesting with the bottle and the
What?
motorbike etiquette.
I just wanted to know if Paul knows this motorcycle, what it is.
Of course, it's La Poderosa was a Norton Model 18. So yeah, it's people have been looking for this bike like for a long time. For Ernesto and Roberto's motorcycle, and no one has ever found it definitively. They know from the registration records exactly the frame number and everything, but it's never been found. So I think it was probably ridden to death. I mean, that the journey that they took was 8,000 miles, which on those roads, on that bike, wow, two up with all of their luggage. I mean, that poor bike, at the end of at a certain point in their trip, they just abandoned their bike and went ahead in trains and all sorts of things. But anyway, fun. I love I've drunk the La Poderosa wine. It's actually, take a look at the producer.
It's Bodega del Fin del Mundo. The
Del
producer.
Fin del Mundo. I love it in Ushuaia.
Right. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And I just saw the movie before I got to South America, and I was completely fascinated about their trip and how they really got into that, and kind of how blue-eyed they were, like, let's get on the bike and ride down there, what all that happened. But you see, if you ride through the world, if you ride to Ushuaia, if you go to a supermarket, you won't find the bike, but you won't find this.
Yeah, for sure. It's an important story.
Next time we drink a bottle together, Paul, all right?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I love it.
For all the audience, they just listen to this podcast. Here's the advice to watch the podcast with this bottle and the etiquette on YouTube and on our YouTube channel, Fellows Ride. And we do all the informations we talked about, the relevant information in the show notes, so that everybody can look and see and Google. And there were a lot. There have been a lot of advices, informations, and everything. And you guys inspired me, and I think the audience as well. Thank you very much. See you soon.
I'm happy to put anything relevant on my website too. If there's an article, I mean, certainly I'll link the show on the website. But if there's another discussion, that would be great.
Okay. Super.
Yeah.
So you see, we can't end. We can't stop. It's amazing. Yeah.
It's a never-ending story.
I try again. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, guys.
And have a good time. See you again.
Okay.
Ciao, ciao.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Ciao. Love
Ciao.
it. Bye.
Bye.
Das war Fellows Ride, der Podcast mit interessanten Gästen, Motorradfahren, mentaler Gesundheit und offenem Visier.